Okay. We live in a world where dinosaurs once roamed the world. If that isn't an eye opener to how much the world can change and how little of the planet's life we have known, I don't know what is. It truly is incredible. So, what I mean with this is the fact that creatures that looked like dinosaurs, that were as big as dinosaurs, right, existed on the planet, that plants and insects and all these things were at scales so much larger than they are now, right? That the conditions for life were so drastically different at some point in our planet's history. We're not on a different planet. It is the same planet, and yet it is completely different. Completely different from what it used to be, right? The creatures that once existed have long since passed away, and yet the world continues to exist, and creatures and life still thrives. And to me, it is just the most bewildering and fascinating thing to think about, because we're so used to the world being this way, right? And we think we live long lives. We think, oh, I lived till I was 90 years old. That's a long life. That's a good life. That is a drop, not even a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. You've barely experienced anything of the age of the universe, right? Like, if we think about the universe from actually having a start date, right, which I don't necessarily think is a logical consideration to have, but if we think about the universe from having a start date, right, it's been I think 13 something billion years. And you've lived 90 of them. It's literally nothing in the grand scheme of life on the planet. And if you think about just okay, humans have been on the planet, right, or humanoids have been on the planet for a couple 100,000 years, right? And you lived for 90, right? Civilization, and as we know it, in history as we know it, has been around for upwards of 12,000 years. I think or 10,000 years is our latest thing we have dated right now. Because I thought Göbekli Tepe was 10,000, but I thought that Karan Tepe was older than that, but I don't remember exactly how much older it was. Anyway, thousands of years, right? And you lived 90, right? The United States of America has only been around for 250 years, right? That is just so laughably small in the grand scheme of things, right? We think we have everything figured out. We think that we know how the world works. We think we understand the world, and we understand we barely understand, I'll say we barely understand the world now, right? And it's so difficult to understand the world because it's always changing. And so what we think the world is, and our concept of what the world is really just that. It's just our concept of the world. The world is always changing, evolving, and adapting, and and just because we have a certain conception of what the world is in our heads, that does not mean that the world will conform to it, right? And so we have things like climate change, and weather patterns are shifting, and things along these lines, like sea levels are changing, ice is melting. We have all these things that are taking place, and to us, we're like, oh, no, this is so bad. And I'm not saying it's good, but it's only bad really for us, right? For life. Whereas the planet itself, life will survive. Some kind of life is going to survive. Even if every living mammal on the planet dies, something is going to live on, right? Something will. Whether it's bacterium or it's some kind of plant or fungi, like something is going to live, right? And because something lives, everything else will eventually recover, most likely. I think that it is highly likely that once life evolves, as long as it has enough time to establish, it's near impossible to get rid of. It's like glitter, right? You make a glitter mess, you're going to be finding glitter all over your house for years to come. Not necessarily, that might be an exaggeration, but I just feel like it gets everywhere. And once it gets everywhere, it's hard to get rid of, right? Because it's all over the place. And just when you think you've gotten rid of all of it, you find another piece of it that you didn't think was possible, right? And so I have a feeling that life at this point is well and thoroughly infested into Earth. And now that it's got its teeth sunk in, it's going to be near impossible to fully eradicate it, right? Conditions need to evolve to be just insanely brutal. And even then, I think life is still going to survive for quite some time, right? Because if you think about it, at like deep sea vents, there is life that survives on like chemo. What's that called? Like chemo, or I think it is chemo. I don't know. They don't use the sun, right? They use just like the chemicals. They feed off of the chemicals that bubble out, or not really, like, I don't know if chemicals, but like the minerals and different materials that bubble out of the Earth's crust. They don't even know what the sun is, right? They don't need it, right? Because life has evolved where there's energy, it can survive. So the only way you're really gonna kill off life is to remove the energy in all methods of sustaining that, right? I think that life can find a way somewhere in the world, because even if most life is built off of water right now and uses water and carbon for a majority of life, that does not mean that you can eradicate all of the carbon in water that is accessible to them, right? And that doesn't mean that they can't adapt to make do when they have to, right? If resources get scarce, so long as it's not an instant change and there's time to adapt, I think everything will. But that's a side tangent from what I was talking about. What I was talking about is just the fact that life changes just so much in the grand scheme of things. The world we know is just a blip, right? It's just a flash. It is not what the world has been and always will be. And so to think that it is and it will be the same and it always has been the same is just moronic. It's not true. And it never will be true, because there's always evolution and change happening in everything. So you cannot, there's the saying, how does it go? You cannot cross the same river twice, or something along those lines. I think that's how it goes, because you are not the same you, and it is not the same river, right? And so no matter how hard you try to keep everything the same, it will never be the same, because in your effort to make it the same, you are changing it, right? And so that is kind of a paradox there, right? But that's just life, I guess. And I just wanted to talk about it because I really do think it's so crazy to think that dinosaurs at one point existed, because the concept of them in the modern day just seems so bizarre. How could they have ever existed, right? However, the fact that dinosaurs existed is just evidence to how complex and, miraculous our existence is, right? The sequence of events that had to take place for humans to exist as they are is just absurd. And yet here we are. And this is what we're doing, right? It's some crazy stuff. So, peace out.